everyone, thank you for attending this session on the Data Platform Virtual Summit 2022. My name is Torres, I'm a Data Platform MVP, and I'll be talking about Power BI metrics, managing KPIs with Power BI. So, this is me. I'm a Data Platform MVP. I work at the Tower Software. I live in Malta. I'm a trainer with some Azure certification, and you can see my contacts. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube. It will be a pleasure to connect and stay in touch. The agenda today. What do you see? Why metrics? Why should we use metrics? Metrics structure and usage methods of the metrics, bounded and unbounded metrics, check-in and status, what are the check-in and status of the metrics, and binding and time axis of the metrics. So, why metrics? Why would we use metrics? The metrics provide context to our data. We can build beautiful visuals, beautiful reports, but the metrics provide additional context to our data. We need some context, and the metrics provide this context. And we can follow the metrics progress. Are we achieving the goals of the company? Are we close to achieve the goals of the company? Are we far from the goals of the company? So we can follow this progress using the metrics. And they simplify the metrics analysis. The use of Power BI metrics simplify the analysis of goals and target values on the business data. Here you see a visual. A visual showing the total of sales for every month. But what's the context? Are these totals good? Are these totals bad? What's the context in relation to this? How we would know what's good and what's bad here? We need to put some context on this visual. For example, a target. What's the target of each month? So we can see precisely on which month the target was achieved, on which month the amount of sales was way beyond the target, and on which month it was not so good. So we can see this information clearly by using a target definition. And using metrics and the status calculations for the metrics, we can see the status for each month. Each month was successful, failure, it was okay. How was each month? So we can see exactly how each month was. So, as we saw, the metrics can give context to our reports and make our reports meaningful. Now let's talk about the metrics structure and usage methods. Metrics structure. First, we create what's called a scorecard. A scorecard can contain many metrics. Each scorecard has many metrics. And each metric can contain submetrics. Each metric can contain a target value that metric needs to achieve. And metrics contain check-ins. The check-ins are information about a specific value that metric achieved on one specific date. We tell the metric, on that date the value is this one. On this other date the value is this other one. And the metric will be following the progress of the value until it achieves the target value. Let's talk about the scorecards. So, in Power BI, in the portal, we can see the metrics on the left blade, and we will see the scorecards available. When you click metrics, we will be seeing the scorecards. Then we have the option to create new scorecards. I strongly recommend to always create new scorecards from a workspace. Inside the workspace, we can use the new scorecard menu, and then you'll be creating a scorecard which will appear inside the metrics blade. By creating the scorecard inside the workspace, inside this workspace we'll be able to see a scorecard object and a dataset object which will contain the scorecard information. This will be inside the workspace. And here we are seeing a set of sample metrics. We have metrics and we have sub-metrics on this image. So you see some metrics and you see some sub-metrics on this image. Metrics containing sub-metrics. And here you are seeing check-ins. This means on specific dates, the metric, the value analyzed by the metric had one specific amount. And the metric calculates the status, if this status means that the result was achieved or if it was a failure. Some fields that we define during the creation of the metric. We define the name of the metric, the current value of the metric, although the current value will change on every check-in which we make on the metric. The final target for the metric, the start date of the metric, and the end date of the metric. So, metric name, current value, final target. You may notice on this image that the current value and the final target, they can be connected to data in some report. We'll talk more about this later. Then the status, and we can define some rules for the metric to automatically calculate the status according to the check-in that you put on the metrics. Then we have a start date and a due date for the metric. Now let's talk about bounded and unbounded metric. What this means? This is related exactly what I mentioned on the previous slide. This is related to the fact that we can connect the current value and the target value to an existing report. And in this case, the metric will be a bounded metric. If we don't make the connection, the metric will be an unbounded metric. So, values usage methods. How do we use the values and the check-ins? We can use a manual input in an unbounded metric. So, we make a check-in and we manually input the value of the metric in a specific date. We can make the current value connected to a report, so the value will be automatically retrieved from that report when a check-in happens. We can connect the current value and the target value, connect both to a report. We can also decide, I will not connect the current value, but I'll connect the target. This is not so usual, but it's technically possible to be done. Then, metrics usage methods. How do we use the metrics? We can use a totally manual method. Why we would use a totally manual metric? We want to follow some metric, the progress of some task, and we don't have a specific tool to follow the progress of some task or some fact in the business. We don't have a specific tool for that. Then we can use Power BI metrics in a manual way. This means that the metric will not be bounded. We will define the target value, and then we will create manual check-ins to input the current value of the metric. We can make this in a single period. For example, let's analyze the sales during 1 month, or we can make it cycled. Let's analyze the sales every month. Every month we reset the metric and start again. The metric can have a single period or can be cycled. We can bind the value and target to a specific report. But when we bind the value and target to a specific report, we may make this binding using a time axis. For example, we will choose a value in the report which repeats every month, has a repetition every month. We have the value for every month. This is a time axis. Or we can choose a single value in the report, point to that value and say this will be the current value of the metric, this other one will be the target value of the metric. So, in this first example, I'm talking about not using a time axis, so using single values. Why would use the metrics in this way? I can analyze the progress of the metrics. In this way, since I don't have a time axis, the check-ins need to be manual. I need to go to the metric and tell I want to create a new check-in. But since the values are binded, the current value will be retrieved automatically from the current value of the report, including this current value on the metric. We can analyze this for a single period, or we can make this metric a cycle metric, month by month, week by week, according to the cycle we would like to use. And then we have a value target binding with a time axis. When we use a time axis to analyze the progress of the metric, we can analyze a past performance of the metric. Why I'm saying that we can analyze the past performance of the metric? Because also pointed to the value target and the time axis, the check-ins will be automatic. We will not make manual check-ins. The metric will retrieve automatically the check-ins from our data source. So, these check-ins will be retrieved from the entire series of data that we have. For example, if we have values for every month, we'll have one check-in for every month. And we can analyze to the past and to the future. Every new month, according to the new month appears on the report, we will have a new check-in on the metric. And we can make a cycle analysis. For example, analyze the metric month by month. And the time axis. You are seeing here, this is the window where we bind the metric with a field in the report. When we bind the metric to a field in the report, the time axis may be identified automatically or may not be identified. When the time axis is identified, we have two options just below. We can track all the data in the time series. So the metric will be tracking this data month by month. Or we can track one single value for this measure on Power BI. In this case, we choose to track all the data in the time series, and you'll be creating a cycle metric, analyzing the data month by month. And let's talk about the check-in and the status. Every check-in has a date, the date of the check-in, the value the metric has on that date, and the status the metric has on that date. The check-in, we already mentioned that it can be automated or manual. If it's manual, we need to input this manually, like this. This is the input of a manual check-in. We need to input the value. In an automatic check-in, we don't have this. The check-in will be automatically created by Power BI according to the cycle of the metric. And about the status, we can create rules for the status. Rules which define that according the value we input on the check-in, one specific status will be set to that check-in. The check-ins happen in a period of time. So each check-in will have a status, and the status will be showing the progress of the metric towards the target value. The rules which we define for each metric, they have conditions. Rules have a processing order, and each condition has a condition type. In this image, we are seeing many rules, a set of 5 rules here. Each one of these rules has a single condition. I have not created any of these rules with multiple conditions. I could create a rule with multiple conditions. Each rule results in a status. If the rule is met, this will be the status for that check-in. So the status rules define the status for a check-in. If the rule is met, that will be the status for the check-in. The rules are processed in order. The first rule, which is met, it stops the processing. So it's important to put the rules in a certain order in such a way that we don't block lower rules to ever be processed. In this example, I'm putting in a decreasing order until the last one, defining that if the value is equal to 0, okay, so not started yet. In this example, I'm using the rule value and comparing with the percentage of the target. But we have other types of rules, types of conditions, better saying. These are rules with a single condition, and there are other types of conditions. The value is the one we are seeing on this example. We have a date, but the date can only be compared with fixed dates, and we have value change. Value change is very interesting because we can compare the current check-in with the percentage of change from the previous check-in. What's the percentage of change between the current check-in and the previous check-in? So let's analyze these condition types. Value. If we choose the conditions value, we can compare the value with a fixed value, not so interesting, or a percentage of the target. This is very interesting. Value change, a percentage of the previous cycle value. the previous check-in. So we can compare, for example, if the current check-in is 110% of the previous check-in, or if it is only 90% of the previous check-in. So we'll know if the value of the current check-in increases or decreases. The only bad news is that at the moment there are some bugs related to the value change condition type. Microsoft is working to fix them. I hope they'll be fixed in some weeks. But at the moment there are some bugs related to this. I can't even demonstrate that. And the date is related to a fixed value. Fixed value, a fixed date. This is not really useful. Come on, Microsoft. Please, make it better. It would be great if we could compare a date with a percentage of the cycle period. Like, have we reached 10% of the cycle period? Have we reached 20% of the cycle period? This would be great to define conditions for our status of the check-ins. But we can't. We can only compare with fixed values. So this is very limiting. Time period and cycles. So in the time period configuration of the metrics, we can define the cycles of the metric. For example, define that the cycle will be monthly. So the metric will be calculated every month, month by month. So let's first see a demonstration about manual metrics and visuals. Later we get back to analyze the bounded metrics. Let's see how an unbounded metric works. Here we are in Power BI portal. We can access the metrics using this icon, metrics. So here we have access to the scorecard and metrics. When I click on metrics, first I see the scorecards that I have. Each scorecard can have a set of many metrics. And I have one scorecard here called DPS 2022. There is one important detail here. We should never use the new scorecard here on this metrics blade. We should never use this object. When we create a scorecard, we should insert the scorecard inside the workspace. So, let me take a look on the workspace. I have the workspace DPS 2022. When we create the scorecard inside the workspace, a scorecard object is created inside the workspace, and the data set containing the scorecard data is created inside the workspace. And we can later use this data set to show the scorecard information inside a report, a Power BI report. If we create a scorecard directly by the metrics blade, we can't do this. We will not have access to this object and we will not be able to do this. So when we create a scorecard, we need always to choose the option to create a new scorecard from our workspace. And the object will be created inside this workspace. So let's get back to the metrics. We have our scorecards here. Let's go to the DPS 2022. And here I have one metric inside this scorecard. And this metric called sales has two other metrics we could call sub-metrics. So I have two other metrics inside the sales metric. And these metrics have its information, target and current value. Let's take a look on the metrics. Each one of these two metrics is defined with a time period as a cycle over cycle. What this means? This means that this metric will be repeated on every cycle. In this example, this metric is set to be repeated on every month. Starting one specific date, this metric will be repeated on every month. Then, every metric has the rules for the status, as we mentioned before, and you see here the rules that are included on this metric. Many different rules related to a percentage of the target value. A percentage of the target value. And if none of these rules is found, the result will be the failure status. It's interesting to note how I included a rule equal 0% of the target. It means in this case I include the status as not started. Nothing has started in this situation. That's an interesting trick. The colors of the status rules, they can be customized on the level of the scorecard. If I choose to edit the scorecard on the settings, I can customize the status rules with the colors and the meaning of the status rules. So this is a definition on the scorecard level, on the settings of the scorecard, while the rules are a definition on the metrics level. The rules are defined for each metric. And here, this metric is an unbounded metric. Let's take a look on this, how this metric is an unbounded. You see, I have specified a current value and a final target value. So it's not connected to any report. So this is an unbounded metric. Both metrics, sales total and number of sales, are unbounded metrics. Both of these metrics. When we use unbounded metrics, we need to define the check-ins manually. The check-ins are manual. So, each one of these check-ins were included by me one by one. So, you may think, this is not that good. Yes, this is not that good. I assure you, the bounded metrics are way better than this. But this is still a very interesting feature to allow you to follow some metrics. If you would like a tool to follow a metric, input the value and follow how is the status of this metric going, how is the status of this metric moving forward, and have a good visual of the status of this metric, you can use the metrics. You can use a simple unbounded metric for that. And once we have this set up on the metrics, we can show the metrics in a report. We have here a new visual, the metrics visual. As you may notice, this visual is still in preview. The metrics visual is still in preview. When you include the metrics visual, we can choose a metric and add the metric to this report. Add a metric as a visual, browse metrics, I will see my metrics, I will choose the scorecard, the metric, I would like to include the sales total, add to report, and here we see the progress of this metric during the current period and the current value of this metric. I can include another one. So another metrics visual, add metrics, metric as a visual, browse metrics, number of sales, and in the same way I will have the current value of the metric compared to the target value of the metric and the progress of the metric during the current cycle. All this is possible with an unbounded metric. This is the most basic benefit that we get from the metrics. Let's discover what we can do with bounded metrics. Let's talk about binding the metric and controlling the time axis of the metric. Binding the metric. The metric needs to recognize the time axis. For us to correctly bind the metric, the time axis needs to be recognized. If the time axis is not recognized, the metric will be bound to a single value and not to a series of values. This is a critical difference when binding a metric, to be sure that the time axis is recognized. We need to use a field marked as date column. The field that we use for the time axis needs to be marked as date column. For example, we build a visual and we would like to make that visual monthly or weekly or yearly. Doesn't matter. But the field that we use to define the periods needs to be a field marked as a date column. Well, how could we do that? Because the field marked as a date column is a date we usually have. We usually have each day on that date. How we would use this field to make a monthly visual, for example? The solution is to create a data group. Using a data group in Power BI, a data group over the date field, the data group is capable to identify that that field is a date time field and propose to us a solution to create a period of dates on that field. So using a date group, we can create the field which we will use on the report and will be recognized as the time axis of the metric. The visual defines the cycle. No cycle configuration needed. What this means? This means that once we have a visual and the visual has information, data for every month, the visual is defining the cycle. The check-ins will happen every month and we will not need to define the time period of the metric saying, oh, this metric will be repeated every month. We don't need to do that because the visual is already defining the cycle together the time axis. We may need a DAX formula to build the target value. If we would like to bind the target value, we may need some kind of formula to build the target value on our database. So, date table configuration. We choose a date dimension, we right click the date dimension to mark that date dimension as the date table. When we mark that date dimension as a date table, we choose one field to be the date column of that table. This allows many date expressions to use this information, this date information. And over the date field, we can create a data group. A data group in Power BI will recognize the field as a date field and suggest us to build a bin. And we define the size of the bins, for example, to be monthly. We can define the size of the bins to be monthly, bin size 1 month, and that's it. So we are creating a monthly field. This field will contain date monthly. And the visual in this case will define the cycle of the metric, because the visual is showing the information monthly. With the visual defining the cycle of the metric, we doesn't need to define a cycle for the metric. This metric will be defined as no cycle, but still will have automatic check-ins created by the visual, by the series of information contained in the visual. And finally, the DEX formula to define the target. For example, I'm using the previous month on this DEX formula to get the total sales from the previous month and multiply by 1.1. It means 110%. So the target will be 110% from the total sales of the previous month. So in this way I built a target for each month. So let's see a demonstration of these details about the configuration of bounded metrics. Let's see how this really works. Let's use this report to build our metrics. So let's analyze this report first. Let's see the model, and here in the model we see a date dimension, and we talked about this before. This date dimension is marked as a date table. Let's take a look on the date table settings. We have the column selected as a date column is selected. Okay. So we have a date table and a date column specified on this model. And in the date dimension, we have a monthly field defined. This monthly field is a data group, was created as a data group. So I can right click and choose the option to edit this group, just for us to analyze how this group was built. And we see the window to build the data group. This data group is called monthly and is built according to the size of the bins, and the bin size is 1 month. It means that each group has 1 month, so we see one date for each month. That's it. So we have our data group built. And we also need the formula for our target value. We have the target value, which is a measure, and the formula for our target value defined here using the previous month, getting the sum of the sales total and multiplying by a percentage. So the target will be 110% of the total sales from the previous month. This is our example report to use for the metrics. Now let's go to the Power BI portal. I have here a metric called binding sales total. And on this metric, I already have some status rules defined according to the percentage of the target. Each rule has one single condition defining what will be the status if this percentage of the target is reached. If no one of these rules is reached, the result will be a failure. But I add a new condition here. I will add a new rule. And on this new rule, I will compare the value if the value is equal to 0% of the target. In this case, I'll define the status as not started. So nothing was hashed yet. In this case, the metric has not started. Let's save. Okay. So the status rules are defined. Now I will edit the metric and then bind the values. Bind the current value and the final target value. Connect to data. Let's choose our report, which is the DPS report. We are not seeing our existing report. Here it is. DPS Adventure report. Next. So I'm seeing our report. I click on the report. It identifies the possible measures used by the report and identifies the time axis, which is the data group that we built based on the date field. So I use actual cost and bind the actual cost to the value. We have the option to choose track all data in this time series, and in this case, using the track all data in this time series, we'll have one check-in for each month. But I could choose to track only this data point, so it will track only the current value of the actual cost, the total of the actual cost. No, track all data in this time series. Connect. The current value is connected. Now let's connect the final target. Connect DPS Adventure. And again, now I'll choose the target measure. Is our DEX formula. And track our data in this time series. Connect. That's it. Let's save. Wait some moments. And let's analyze what we have in the history. That's it. So we have a history of all the values, monthly values on our report, and the status of these monthly values according to their percentage in relation to the target. According to the percentage in relation to the target, the status is defined on the monthly values. And this metric will continue to hold information about the progress of the values month by month. On every month, it will continue to hold information about the progress of this value. In this way, we just built a binded metric. Our metric is binded and it has the current value and the target value bounded. That's it. This is an example of a bounded metric. Thank you very much for attending this session. You can see my contacts on the screen. It will be a pleasure to stay in touch. Send any questions you have to me. It will be a pleasure to keep in touch. And a special thank you to Microsoft for supporting the data platform GX SQL Server GX community, and this data platform summit conference. And there are some ways for you to win some prizes. You can post a selfie, you can give session conference feedback, or visit the sponsor and exhibitors. Thank you very much.